Okay, before we kick off our simple game project, I wanted to spend just a minute and talk about game objects. Now, as far as I'm concerned, game objects are the very heart of any game created with Unity.
So what is a game object?
So a game object is, well, that's the funny thing. A game object's everything. Well, just about everything as far as objects in a game go. A game object is a base object that comes with a transform ability, so it can be positioned in the world, and then it has components attached to it.
Okay.
So perhaps you can help me come up with an analogy here. So you being the student, this should be a lot of fun.
Okay.
So I'll describe to you a little bit more about Unity, and then you find something in the real world that you can relate this to. And I'll give you a very cheap version out the door. We order a pizza. The base of a pizza comes with our crust, and we've got some sauce and maybe even some cheese on it.
Okay.
And every time we get a pizza, we'll always have that.
Sure.
Okay? Now, you can turn around and you can start adding stuff to the pizza to get a very specific kind of pizza. I would like perhaps a pepperoni pizza.
Okay.
I would like a supreme. I would like a taco pizza, something radically different.
Yeah.
But these pizzas are all indeed different types of pizzas. With a game object, we come in and we attach components to the game objects. And by attaching components, we then come in and we give that object in the game its specific meaning, if you will. So a camera is nothing more than a game object with a camera component attached to it. Let's take a look at this real quick.
Okay.
If I come up here to game object in the menu, I can create an empty game object. So out the door, if I do just that and create an empty game object, you can see right here, game object. Let's look over in the inspector with this guy selected. All we have is the ability to set a name, activate or deactivate him. We can assign a layer or set a tag. And we have a transform component that's always going to be there with the game object. And this gives us the ability to position this guy within the world. But that's it. There's no geometry associated with him. There's no light associated with him, no sound, no nothing. Those are things that we will then define by simply coming up to component, and then we can begin attaching components to this guy. So I can come over here to mesh, and I could attach a mesh filter, a mesh renderer, text mesh, etc.
Okay, so what I'm getting out of this, conceptually, a game object is kind of like a generic machine.
Yeah, there you go.
We don't really know what it does. It's just a generic machine. And depending on the stuff we bolt onto it, it could perform specific things. Like we could turn it into a dishwasher if we bolted the right things onto it. Or we could turn it into a battle tank instead. Okay. And they're all the same thing. They just have different things attached to them.
Exactly.
Okay.
So, the difference between our light and our camera is simply the components that have been attached to the game object.
Okay.
Because as I come through, take a look at this, in the hierarchy, because remember the hierarchy is populated with nothing but game objects. As I come through here and I click on game objects, you'll notice that the top, for the most part, is going to stay the same. Now, there is some prefab stuff that's going to show up here, and prefabs they're special prepackaged game objects, if you will. That's something we'll explore a little bit later. Very powerful stuff. But the key thing is you're seeing the same thing as I go through all of these game objects. You're seeing a name, you're seeing a place for a tag and a layer to be assigned, and you're seeing a transform component. And then with different objects, you're seeing additional components attached. Like in this particular case, this level objects game object right here is acting as a parent for all of these guys that are up underneath him, but he has no components assigned to him. But if we were to jump down here to somebody else, this guy right here, _bunker combined, he has a component attached. The component that he has attached is a script. So this script has been attached. So that's really nice. If you wanted to, let's say, create some sort of a script that's going to cause something within your environment to take place, you can drop an empty game object in, as we've done right here, and then you can write a script using whichever language it is that you prefer to use with Unity, and then you can take that script and drag it from down here, because remember, the script, of course, is going to be an asset, meaning it's going to show up down in your project section. You can simply grab, drag, and drop it. As a matter of fact, we're not going to use this guy, so I'll pick the FPS counter. We grab, drag, drop, and boom. We have now attached a component to this game object, giving this game object more focus, if you will,
more functionality,
a more specific reason to exist.
Now, do all of these game objects have the transform information?
Yes.
So, and again, I'll keep throwing these out there because I do come to this from this kind of 3D animation perspective. These are kind of analogous to locators in Maya or helper objects inside of 3ds Max. They just kind of have a position and they're ready for things to be attached to them?
Yeah, pretty much. We have no real gizmo here other than, we're looking at the translate gizmo right now that we can move it around with just to adjust these positional numbers. But there is no sprite associated with it. There's no geometry, etc.
So like a locator that didn't even have the little crossed lines.
Exactly.
Just like the general concept that you have some sort of null object in place.
Exactly.
Okay.
And then when we come in behind that and we begin bolting things onto it, we begin attaching components. Mm-hmm. And then by hooking up these different components, we give that particular object its meaning that we want it to have.
Okay.
So coming up here, you saw where we had created an empty game object. Instead of creating an empty one, we also have a bunch of game objects that have been predefined for us just so that we don't have to go through the same steps over and over and over. If we were, let's say, creating a bunch of cubes or we needed to create several cameras, we already have these things predefined, as I accidentally hit the mouse off the screen. So if we want to grab a particle system or a camera, let's just drop a particle system in real quick. So I've thrown a particle system in down here. Let's look at the top. What do you know? Standard game object, standard transform information, and now we have very specific components that have been attached. So these components all work together in giving us this particle system effect that you can actually see right there in your screen, alive and popping.
I gotcha. So to actually kind of retract what I said earlier, it's not like this is like a locator. Really, I mean, if you were taking the Maya aspect, and I know I can't really assume that everybody watching is a Maya person, but I am. So if you are too,
I knew where you were going with it, so I didn't have a problem with it.
This is actually more like a transform node.
Yeah. It's even if you want to take another step away, look at this as kind of like a base class in the programming world, where we're then going to extend this class into more specific functionality.
Well, see, I was actually trying not to say that right out of the gate because it felt like you were trying to stay away from using words like class right now. So I was like, how can I say this without talking about base classes?
Fair enough, but that's the key thing. Just as long as you understand that by coming in and attaching components, you then define the functionality of that game object. So again, here we are with a particle system. Let's go ahead and jump back up real quick to game object, come down and, let's do a camera real quick. So I'll throw a camera. So here we are, look, brand new camera sitting in the scene.
Yeah.
Starting at the top in the inspector, same thing. There's our transform component, and we're looking at the name, tag, layer information. But then up underneath that, take a look at this. Once again, we have a component that has been attached, another component, and another component. So here we are with multiple components that have been attached to this camera.
Okay.
Now, could we have built these things from ground up? Absolutely. You can simply start with your own, if I come back over here, empty game object, and then once you've created an empty game object, as we've done here, you can then come in to component and you can begin adding into it the things that you would like in order to give it the functionality that you're looking for. So even here with rendering, camera, blink, now we've got a camera component. And this guy's just come to life, and look at that. All of a sudden, he has where we're going to be looking at with our camera. We've got the gizmo available for us inside our scene. Very powerful stuff. And as easy it is to add components, we can, of course, come in here and quickly reset or remove components altogether. So if I remove this out, we no longer have a need for seeing our camera gizmo information over here, so it's now gone.
Now, are each of these components completely modular? For instance, could we have like a camera that was also a particle emitter?
Yes, you can. Yeah, you can pile a whole bunch of things on, having them all do different things.
Okay.
Absolutely. But the most powerful thing, as far as I'm concerned, is the ability. And I can just show it to you up here. Nah, if we come up here to, I was going to jump back over to the project, but there's so many ways that you can do the same thing. But when you write scripts, your scripts are just components as well. So here we are with a ton of different script components that can be added to our game object. So again, they're just components. We can simply add them on, or of course, from over here, we can come down to any of these scripts and drag the script over here and just drop it in the inspector, or we can simply drag it straight onto the object itself, and then boom, we now have another component that has been attached.
Okay.
But that's the big thing that I would like for everyone to take away from this video, and that is just understanding that every object that we're working with in our scene is a game object. And at the base, the game object is nothing more than a place to set a name and a tag and a layer. Now, there are some other things that we can get to behind the scenes, and we've got a transform node as well. But it's more or less just like, a clump of clay. And now we need to come in and start manipulating that. And the way we manipulate things here inside of Unity is by adding on components and then adjusting the parameters of those components. So any other questions?
No, sir.
All right. Well, with that is going to wrap up this quick video over the game object.